or wind and snow, that's the single best time to take an under. So we'll definitely have some spots of that coming up here in the next couple months. So keep an eye on that.
Absolutely. We've all been burned before, I think, taking an under on a very rainy day when somebody runs for like 250 yards because no one can tackle them,
Right.
I think that absolutely happens. But, the wind in itself, that stops the passing game whatsoever. So each team stacks the box. I totally get that. Passing games even work sometimes in the rain, like you said. It makes sense. Well, going into that, what's the best day of the week to check the weather report and try to fire on your unders or overs, before people catch on to the forecast? I mean, obviously most bets come in on the Saturday, right before the game, and maybe the Friday when people are all coming into their destinations. But what day do you think it's best for our listeners?
Well, I think this is a great question, first of all, because it's different than it used to be. I'm fairly new to this compared to some guys. I've been doing this professionally for 9 years. I've been betting these totals for maybe 15 or 16 years personally. But I have to say that, 6 or 8 years ago, you could check the weather report and bet these on a Friday before Saturday. Now things are happening a lot sooner. Everybody's now starting to realize that weather makes a big difference in these games. You see some line moves, Tuesday and Wednesday of the week now, where in the past that would be unheard of. Now people are watching that long-term forecast, and you start seeing a game move down 3 or 4 or 5 points, and you look and see, why might that line be moving down? And then you check the weather report, and that's it. I have to say, you have to be really careful about that, because if you want to go trust a weather report 4 or 5 days away and that be the sole reason you bet a game, I think that's a dangerous proposition. I will say, if you already like the under in a game, this is something I do. If I already like the under, I'll look at the long-term forecast that's 4 days away then, and maybe I make it a bigger play than I would have if there's wind, rain, bad weather in the forecast. But, there are times when I take a game on the under solely because of the weather. And if you're doing it solely because of the weather, I'd like to wait till Thursday, a couple days before the game. Even if I miss a point or two of line value there, I think it's worth it to wait because, everybody knows the weathermen can be wrong, and they're wrong a lot more often the farther you get away from that day. So I think 2 days is a fair time to try to be about 48 hours ahead of the game.
That makes complete sense to me. Yeah, the variance of checking the weather, it's a lot. Well, they're a lot more inaccurate when they try to forecast 5 or 6 days in advance. I mean, I've seen weather reports are supposed to be storming a week before or whatever, and then all of a sudden the day of it's sunny and no wind. That happens. Right. But Thursday, you can really see if there's a low pressure spinning or something like that. I'm no meteorologist or anything, but that makes absolute sense to me. So that's a great day for you listeners out there. Check on Thursday. You might miss some initial line move, but it might be the wrong line move. And you can also take advantage of some things going the wrong way if you see a report changing. So pay attention to that. But let's get into some of these games. And I'd like to get started here with one that I'm sure you're familiar with, a nice little MAC game here, Buffalo versus Toledo. Toledo laying, well, they were laying -1.5. I think that's changed a little bit. Over under at 66. What are your thoughts about this game?
Yeah, this has been a flip favorite here, and I agree with the line move. I would take Buffalo if I was taking a side in this game. I'm not sure that I will, but that's certainly my lean. Toledo was laying 3 to start with here. Buffalo now -1, -1.5 on the odds board, some of them. So I think that's the right move. I think Buffalo is the balanced team here. You've got a Toledo team that can score, but a Toledo defense that is very weak. Toledo this year, 110th out of 130 teams in yards per play allowed. Buffalo in the top 25 right now. Now, I will say I'm not sure that Buffalo has a top 25 defense. They haven't really played that many good offenses. But the Buffalo defense is certainly better than the Toledo defense. A lot of people know that Tyree Jackson is really good for Buffalo, but I don't think enough people know that they also have a good running game. 4.55 yards per carry. This is a Buffalo offense that I think is balanced, and then they have a solid defense. think Toledo came out as a favorite here, largely on perception based on the past. Toledo is a team that has been very good in the MAC many years in the past. They're not as good as they have been in the past, and I think Buffalo's better than they have been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you 100% here, and I took this one early. I had plus 2.5 before the line moves. I caught this on a Sunday, of course. Buffalo 5-2 against the spread. Toledo is 2-4 this year. Since Lance Leopold arrived last year, they're a third best at 14-5 against the spread here. And, I don't see why they opened up at +3 in this game. They have a 0.7 net yards per play here advantage. So, that's a decent margin, 0.7 net yards per play. They give up less than 3.9 yards per run, and Toledo's given up 5.3 yards per run. Both schedules are pretty similar. I'm thinking, just like you said, the spread opened up because the name Toledo and how fast they, were known to play. But Buffalo can control this game by pounding the rock here. And if they need, Tyree Jackson to Anthony Johnson, they're going to get it. And I think Kevin Marks and Jarrett Patterson's going to have a great running day. So totally agree with you there. I actually like the spread all the way up to 3. So if it's still there, I'd say go ahead and fire away on that.
One more note on this game real quick. I will say this is one where weather could be an issue. So keep an eye on this one. The long-term weather forecast here in Ohio shows quite a bit of weather this week as far as heavy winds. So listeners should keep an eye on that one for this weekend.
Absolutely. Nice little tip there. Love it. Oklahoma versus TCU here. Oklahoma's favored by 7.5 points. Over under is 61. What are your thoughts on this game?
So this one's a really complex handicap. I have to tell you, I've thought a lot about this game already, and I'm still not entirely sure what I'm going to do with this game if I do anything. My initial lean is to take TCU plus the points. Gary Patterson's a really good coach, and he's done very well as an underdog long term. Having said that, I think it's complicated a bit by the fact that Oklahoma's coming off a bye week, and Oklahoma just lost last game. So Oklahoma should be really heavily invested in this game. I wouldn't see any reason why they wouldn't be up for this game. They've had a couple weeks to prepare. TCU has some major turnover issues too. They've had issues at the quarterback spot to where, they could have won some of these games. They could have beaten Ohio State if it weren't for their turnovers. They played well in that game. They have a big play offense. I trust Gary Patterson's defense to be ready for this Oklahoma offense. He's a very good defensive coach. Having said that, Oklahoma has a lot of weapons. This total sitting at 61. My lean would be under, but it's not a strong lean. I think that, the Oklahoma defense has been a little bit disappointing this year, and TCU's offense has some big playability. Usually I would want to take the under in a TCU game against a top opponent. This one, not quite as strongly. And as far as the side, I do still lean TCU if I had to take a side. But like I said, Oklahoma is in a better spot off a bye.
And that's the kind of angle I was going for here. I love the spot for Oklahoma, especially with what happened last week. Both teams have not been performing well against the spread. TCU's 1-4-1, Oklahoma's 2-4. But Oklahoma coming off that bye week and a loss beforehand is why I really like this spot. Last week, the kids on this team watched 4 of the top 10 teams go down, almost 6 of them, really, And these kids know that they're still in this. Then they have a legitimate shot at the playoffs, and they're all rested up. TCU, on the other hand, had a bad loss, really, against a pretty good Texas Tech team, but they're on their second string quarterback. Oklahoma's number 1 in yards per play at 8.9. That's a half a yard higher than second place Bama. Bama's at like 8.3. So that they moved that ball. The Texas game, I thought Oklahoma was the better team. They just didn't win. Oklahoma has over 3 yards per play more than what their defense gives up here. So they outscore their opponents by 21 points. TCU's only at 5.6 yards per play, and they give up about 4.6 to their opponents and have an 8-point margin. So I think the spread is wrong. So I'm going to take Oklahoma here. I like Oklahoma minus 7.5. And I just like the spot here with these kids seeing an opportunity of closing out the Big 12 and going into possibly the playoffs. Let's move on. Wake Forest versus Florida State. Florida State is giving 10.5 points. Over-unders at 60. Little ACC action. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, this one, the first thing that jumps out to me is there's going to be a lot of plays in this game, a lot of tempo. Wake Forest is third in the nation in tempo so far this year. A couple of years ago, I guess it was beginning of last year, Wake Forest decided to change things up and go really fast. Worked really well for them last year. So far this year hasn't worked very well. Florida State's going to want to play fast under Willie Taggart. Lots of plays in this game. I think the total over would be my strongest lean in this game. Now, I have to say, Florida State is likely to get better based on their pure talent. Now, Florida State's offensive line is their weakness, but Florida State has enough skill position talent that they should get better over the course of the season. Having said that, laying this many points here, not something I really want to do with a Florida State team that's been very disappointing this year. And to me, Willie Taggart, I think there's still question marks about him. How good of a coach is he? He did a good job in some smaller schools. He did okay at Oregon, and then he comes back to Florida State, and so far the results haven't been very good. So I want to wait and see on him. My strongest lean here is the over. I think both teams will play very quickly. You'll get some explosive plays. So that's the way I'd play this if I had to.
Yeah, I think we're in complete agreement here. The question to me is which Florida State home team shows up here. The one that got smoked by Virginia Tech, which was in the rain and a little bit of wind there too, or the one that should have beaten Miami outright. I'm looking at their three last games here. Instead of looking at their bad start, they're averaging 31 points per game in the last three and 5.4 yards per play at home. Wake Forest, on the other hand, is, like you said, top three fastest team in the nation. They're actually averaging the most plays per game at 91. Wake Forest still averages over 32 points per game and 5.2 yards per play, even after only scoring those 3 points against Clemson. That was pretty sad for them. It really hurt their stats. But I think it's good to look at that and take that out. I think the over is way too low on this. Way too low. I think it should be around 66 or 67. I'm taking the over with you. I'm definitely liking this as one of my bigger plays for Florida State versus Wake Forest over 60. So, moving on. Pac-12 spot. I believe College Game Day is showing up here in Pullman. Oregon versus Washington State. Another line flip here. Washington State giving 2.5 points at home. Over-unders at 66.5. I took this at a pick'em. I believe I was on Monday, and it went all the way up to minus 2.5. What are your thoughts on this big Pac-12 showdown?
So you're meaning you took Washington State at pick'em?
Sorry, did I say Oregon? Yes, I took Washington State at pick'em. No,
you didn't say. I was asking for clarification. I thought you meant you took Washington State, but I wanted to make sure. I agree with you there. I like Washington State. I think this is a really good spot for them here. The more I look at this game, the more I like it. Oregon's been a good team this year, and I still think Oregon is a good team. Herbert's a really good quarterback. They have plenty of talent. Obviously, Oregon should have beaten Stanford as well. Just a terrible way to lose that game. But Oregon's played some really tight games against top opponents several weeks in a row. They've been able to bounce back from that loss to Stanford. You have to give them credit for that. But at some point here, Oregon's going to have a letdown game, or they're going to have a spot where they don't play as well. Washington State has been sitting around getting ready for this game. College Game Day, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it might be the first time College Game Day has ever been at Washington State.
It is.
So this is a really big deal. Washington State has a really good home field advantage to start with. You think they have a good home field advantage on a normal weekend? Washington State is going to have a great home field advantage in this game. I've been impressed with Washington State's offense this year. I didn't know that their passing game would be as good as it was. Getting Minshew to come over from East Carolina. To me, this is a spot where Washington State, their passing game is the strength of their team, clearly. Oregon, they have a good run defense. They're 18th in yards per carry allowed, but their passing defense is